So let's look at learning objective F and G, where we're going to select appropriate measures of center and spread and understand the relationship between the shape, mean, and median of a distribution. First question here, what factors should you consider when choosing summary statistics? The first thing you should really do is look at this, if the distribution is skewed or if there's outliers present. If you don't see this happening, then obviously by default you're going to notice hopefully that the distribution is symmetric with no outliers. So really you're just looking at the shape and the outliers of this, so two elements of the SOX. Now when you know the shape of your distribution, that's going to tell you what should you use for your measures of center and spread. We've already talked about this a little bit, but if you are going to have a skewed distribution, what you should use for center is median, and what you should use for spread is IQR. These two measurements are the least resistant to outliers and aren't as impacted if the distribution is skewed. On the other side, if you do have a symmetric distribution, you could be very comfortable using the mean and the standard deviation, which we just talked about. Now, before you even make that decision, if the question says, how should you describe this data, you can't really describe it unless it's been plotted out. So if they give you a picture of the plot, great. If not, always plot your data. The easiest type of plot to do, again, is a dot plot. You could do a stem plot, you could do a histogram. They are very open-ended on what type of graph you do, as long as it's representative of your quantitative or categorical data. But always plot your data to get a visual, and then from there you can really confirm the shape of the distributions, which will help you pick your measure of center and measure of spread. So just to put it all together, clearly this distribution here is nicely symmetric. Because of that, we're going to choose for our center is our mean, and our spread is going to be our standard deviation. Technically, you could also use the range. The range is very much impacted by outliers, but in a symmetric distribution, that's fine. The more common one is really to point out the standard deviation, but again, range could be okay. Here we're going to see it skewed to the right, so we have outliers on the right-hand side. Because of that, our center should be the median, and our spread we definitely want to talk about is just IQR. If it were skewed to the left, where we have outliers on the low end, again, we're going to have the same thing. Our measure of center should be the median, and our spread should be the IQR. Some of the very helpful reminders are right here. Don't say mean if you mean the median. It's actually a very common mistake that students will do, so don't make it. If you're talking about range or IQR, they are final calculations. So if you say range, don't show that you're just doing max minus min and not give a final answer. If you're doing IQR, just don't show Q3 minus Q1. You must give the final answer for that. And also be careful to avoid saying that the outliers skew the mean. Skew is actually a shape of the distribution. It's not something that is necessarily caused by the outliers. It's just how the data looks once it's graphed. Remember at the beginning of the chapter we looked at a case study where a teacher was wondering if rewards promote creativity. She did an experiment in two of her classes. The children who believed they were competing for a prize produced less creative collages, whereas those that were just doing it to have a party were more creative. So she had them create their collages and she graded them and gave them a rating. Now what you're going to notice here is this is a dot plot she made of their ratings. This here was if there was an external reward for how great your collage was. This is the internal reward, so they were just going to have a party. So if you look at the shape and the distribution, the center and the spread of this, what do you think? Do rewards actually make you more creative or less creative? If you were to look at this, it looks like that for most people, creativity would be its own reward. Overall, if we compare the shapes, this is more somewhat symmetric. This is a little more skewed to the left, meaning we could possibly have some outliers out here. The measure of center is going to be pulled more to the left on the people that had the extrinsic rewards versus on here it's going to be more towards the center. And we also have some on the higher end for our maximum. Now in our stats class we would end up doing a little bit more than just this analysis, but as far as chapter 1 goes, this is a nice introduction of something you would do within one of the questions you may have to answer.